Today, I'm going to be breaking down some of my favorite tournament or GPP plays for this Week 1 NFL Draftkings main slate. And like I've done in years past, I'm going to break down a couple of my favorite game stacks, as well as some of my favorite individual plays and stacks. With that being said, let's dive right into this. Now, the most popular game to target here in Week 1 is going to be that game between the Dolphins and Chargers, and not only from a tournament or GPP perspective, but also a cash game perspective. If you haven't checked out my cash plays video quite yet, make sure you do that before Sunday. I always think my cash plays are tournament viable as well. And look, I have no problem targeting this game between the Chargers and Dolphins from a game stack perspective. You'll see me mention some individual plays throughout today's video from that game. But for the most part, if I'm trying to win $1 million here, I don't want to target the popular game stack chalk. So I'm going to get away from that here in this video. Again, I have no problem with people doing that. But the first game I want to highlight here is that game between the Seattle Seahawks and the Los Angeles Rams. And the particular stack that I like targeting here in this game is Geno Smith stacked up with his top two wide receivers in DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, and then running it back with Cam Akers and Tyler Higbee on the Rams side of things. Now, there's a few reasons I like this game in particular. For starters, it does have the third highest implied total here on the main slate with 46 points, but what I even more so like about this game is just 2 weeks ago, a bunch of people were talking about it from a game stack perspective when it comes to tournaments, but now that Cooper Kupp has been ruled out, a lot of people are moving away from this game. I still think there's a lot of high upside here, don't get me wrong, I'd love to roster Cooper Kupp this week, but there's still some high scoring potential in my opinion. Now, when it comes to stacking up the Seahawks here, there are a number of different players that we can target because this Rams defense is flat out just going to be bad. Outside of Aaron Donald, they really don't have many playmakers. I know Kenneth Walker will probably be a popular target from the Seattle side of things, but for me, I wanted to keep it simple. Stack up Geno Smith with his top two wide receivers and DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. But on the Rams side of things, I did get a little more specific. They do have some cheap wide receivers who are available this weekend if you really need the price savings and you want to target this game. But for me, I wanted to target Higbee and Akers specifically. Now, I know it's a brand new season, brand new teams here. We really don't have a lot of information heading into Week 1 on how these teams are going to look or play. So we kind of got to go off some statistics from last year. And what I do know from last year is the Seahawks defense really struggled against tight ends and running backs. As you can see here, they ranked 32nd overall versus tight ends, so that's going to be good for Higbee. And they ranked 29th overall against running backs. That should be good for Cam Akers. So I'm hoping that the Rams kind of concentrate their volume and targets through Akers and Higbee here to kind of make up and fill this game stack. And then another game stack that I like here this weekend that should fly under the radar is this game between the New Orleans Saints and the Tennessee Titans. And the particular stack that I like here is stacking up Derek Carr with his top two wide receivers in Chris Olave and Michael Thomas, and then running it back with Derrick Henry on the Titans side of things. Now, as you can see here, the implied total for this game is only 43.5 points. Part of the reason it should go low owned and fly under the radar. But again, there's a lot of uncertainty heading into Week 1, and when you're playing indoors, there's always that potential for a high-scoring game. Now, the reason I went with the Saints quarterback here in Derek Carr and his top two pass catchers is because this Titans secondary was brutal last year. In fact, they ranked dead last versus wide receivers in fantasy points per game, but they were very good against the run, so I don't really know if I want to have a lot of exposure to Jamal Williams in my tournament lineups, especially considering he's projected to be one of the highest owned running backs in Week 1. And then on the Titans side of things, I think there's a few routes that we could go. I don't mind D-Hop. I don't mind Treylon Burks at his price. We could even go with Chig at the tight end position. But for me, just made sense to go with Derrick Henry. I always love rostering this guy in my tournament lineups. One of the highest ceilings at the running back position. And sure, the Saints have notoriously been a good defense at home and good against the run, but they did rank 14th overall last year against running backs, about mid-pack, and Derrick Henry can really beat up on anybody on any given day. Could he end up with 70 yards here in this game? Sure, absolutely. But from a tournament perspective, again, I know the ceiling for him is 120 plus yards, multiple touchdowns. I'll absolutely take that here in this game stack. Alright, now everyone, before we dive into some of my favorite individual plays and stacks here, want to mention a few things. Number one, I do have a Discord channel with a great group of people in there, largely talking NHL, but we got some people talking football and really just talking prize picks and sports betting. If you want to join that, there's a link to do so in the description below. Speaking of links in the description below, I also have a Draftkings league that I've created with close to 100 people now. I've got a tournament out here for week one, paying out the top 5 places. If you want to join that, again, link in the description below too. And finally, if you've made it this far in the video, I appreciate you. If you could like this video and subscribe to the channel, I would greatly appreciate that. We're trying to get GriffDogg Sports here to 4,000 subs. Not only will I have NFL and NHL content coming out for you guys all year long, but we brought that brand new entertainment segment to GriffDogg Sports as well called Mulligan Masters. Make sure you check out that playlist on my channel. Now, diving into some of these individual plays and stacks here, we're going to kick it off at the quarterback position. And look, everyone, there's a lot of viable options here in week one. Again, with so much uncertainty, we could stack up Burrow, Herbert, Tua, even Baker Mayfield is kind of interesting heading into Minnesota, playing in a dome. Yeah, 2 top wide receivers in Evans and Godwin. But I'm looking at the ownership, and I'm kind of looking at some of the game theories here heading into week one. And 2 guys who are just flying under the radar and absolutely shouldn't be is Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts. Now, I talked about both of these guys in my cash video yesterday, so I'm going to keep this short and sweet. Lamar Jackson here at $8,000 needs 32 Draftkings points in order to meet 4x value. For my tournament lineups, I'm usually shooting for 200 points. Obviously, anything above that is great, but 200 is going to put you in the money more times than not, and could help you even take down a tournament as well. 32 points is absolutely doable for Lamar, especially in a home matchup like this against the Houston Texans. And then for Jalen Hurts, we need 31.2 Draftkings points in order for him to meet 4x value. Obviously, he's very capable of doing that. Someone who almost averaged 27 Draftkings points per game just last season. And both these guys have a number of different stacking options that we could roll with. I'm going to talk about a couple of those players here in just a few minutes. But before we talk about some of those stacking options with Lamar and Jalen Hurts, we're going to talk some running backs here, and I got 4 on my radar here from a tournament perspective. First guy I got there is Nick Chubb, and I actually like quite doing a little mini stack here in this game with Jamar Chase and Nick Chubb. I'll talk about Chase here in just a couple of minutes. But Nick Chubb here, we need 32.8 Draftkings points in order for him to meet 4x value. This game between the Browns and Bengals does have the second highest implied total on the week 1 main slate with 47.5 points. Yeah, no Kareem Hunt here this year, so Nick Chubb could very well get more involved in the passing game and should really see all of the goal line work. FTN currently has a ceiling projected score here for Chubb of 24.2 Draftkings points, but I honestly think he could go for 30 plus in this matchup. Obviously, that's not a guarantee, everyone, but he is someone who's got 30 plus Draftkings point upside. The next guy I got on my list there then is Raheem Mostert of the Miami Dolphins. Mentioned at the beginning of this video that I would be talking about a couple of players from this game between the Chargers and Dolphins. A lot of high scoring upside, and it's going to be a popular game to target. But Mostert, in terms of the Miami Dolphins, I think most of the people are going to target Tyreek Hill, and rightfully so. I'm going to have him in a couple of my tournament lineups. But Mostert is someone who could fly under the radar in this game. I don't want to say he's going to be super low owned because, again, this game is going to be popular in general. But with no Jeff Wilson, I kind of really like this play. At $5,400 on DraftKings, we need 21.6 Draftkings points in order for him to meet 4x value. And the Chargers ranked 26th overall against running backs last year. Mostert could have himself a day against this defense. FTN currently has a ceiling projected score for Mostert of 17 Draftkings points, but again, definitely someone I think could go for 20 plus. Another 5K play that I like here is Khalil Herbert of the Chicago Bears. $5,300 on DraftKings. We need 21.2 Draftkings points in order for him to meet 4x value. Look, this Chicago Bears team wants to run the ball. I understand Justin Fields took some big leaps last year, and I expect him to do the same thing here this year, but for the most part, they want to run the damn ball. And Khalil Herbert should be the number 1 back, seeing most of the work and goal line work, being that David Montgomery is now in Detroit. And I like the matchup here against the Packers at home, who ranked 24th overall against running backs just last season. And then finally, I got Brian Robinson Jr. there of the Washington Commanders. Now, there is an interesting split here between Antonio Gibson. I'm expecting a 60-40 split. Again, a lot of uncertainty heading into week 1, but that's kind of where I'm at with this, with Robinson Robinson getting the 60% share there, and I suspect he'll get most of the goal line work. Maybe not all of it, but most of it. At $5,100 on DraftKings, we need 20.4 DraftKings points in order for him to meet 4x value. And the Cardinals, again, I mentioned this in my video yesterday, could legitimately be the worst team in the NFL this year, and they weren't very good against running backs last year, ranking 30th overall against the position. And now, everyone, we're getting into my favorite position when it comes to tournaments, and that is the wide receivers. You know, I mentioned this in years past. I could highlight 20 different wide receivers on the main slate week in and week out, but we're going to concentrate it down to 5 wide receivers that I like here for week 1. And the first guy I got on my list there is Jamar Chase of the Cincinnati Bengals. Kind of name dropped him earlier when I was talking about Nick Chubb. Like doing a mini stack of those two in that game. And I know he's going to be semi-popular here this week, but he should be lower owned than Tyreek Hill and Justin Jefferson. So in terms of wide receivers in that 8K range, I'm kind of getting the quote-unquote low-owned guy. At $8,100, we need 32.4 DraftKings points in order for him to meet 4x value. Again, the second highest implied total here on the main slate between the Bengals and Browns at 47.5 points. Jamar went off last year against this defense. Again, brand new year, but he did have 10 receptions, 119 receiving yards, and scored a touchdown for 31.5 DraftKings points. No reason to think he couldn't do that here again in week 1. I then got A.J. Brown there of the Philadelphia Eagles. Makes for a nice stack with Jalen Hurts. At $7,600, we need 30.4 DraftKings points in order for him to meet 4x value. I know a lot of people are kind of scared of this defense here for the Patriots, but they did rank 23rd overall against wide receivers last year. It's by no means elite, and A.J. Brown, he is an elite wide receiver. He can definitely win in these matchups against the Patriots secondary. But again, I just like this Eagles offense in general because I believe they're going overlooked here in week 1. You could stack up a Devontae Smith here as well with Jalen Hurts, or even a Dallas Goedert, who I'm also going to talk about in just a couple of minutes. Now, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself with this next play here in George Pickens of the Pittsburgh Steelers, but I have an eerie feeling that I could be rostering this guy quite a bit in my tournament lineups this year. He's someone who does have some big play upside. We saw that in his rookie season, obviously saw it at Georgia as well, and the chemistry between him and Pickett seemed to be picking up with each ensuing game last season. Now we got a full off season here, brand new year, both those guys in year 2. I'm excited to see the upside that Pickens offers, and at $5,000 here this week, we only need 20 DraftKings points from him in order to meet 4x value. And I think a lot of people are going to look at this 49ers defense and go, oh yeah, it's one of the best in the league, and you wouldn't be wrong, but they weren't very good as a secondary last year, ranking 27th overall against wide receivers. And then another wide receiver here that I like at $5,000 is Jahan Dotson of the Washington Commanders, and I'll keep this short and sweet. We are picking on the Arizona Cardinals, but I want to mention one thing in particular here. I believe that Dotson is going to run the most routes and have the most field participation percentage for all Washington wide receivers this week. I know Terry McLaurin is coming back, but coming back from a turf toe injury, he could be slightly limited, making Dotson the number 1 wide receiver. And then a cheaper wide receiver that I like is Zay Flowers of the Baltimore Ravens. Easy to stack him up with Lamar, and we could stack up Lamar with a number of different guys, OBJ, Rashad Bateman, and obviously Mark Andrews. But it's a similar situation, in my opinion, here for Zay Flowers as to Jahan Dotson that I just talked about, in a sense that he could have the most routes run and field participation percentage for these Baltimore wide receivers because both Bateman and OBJ are coming back from major injuries. We don't know that for sure, obviously, considering he is a rookie wide receiver, but he looked pretty damn good in the preseason, and I have to suspect he's going to play at least 50% of the time. I'm more so thinking closer to 70% of the time. Now, moving on here to the tight end position, I got 3 that I want to highlight from a tournament perspective. First being TJ Hawkinson of the Minnesota Vikings. Priced at $5,900, or the second most expensive tight end here on the main slate, just behind Mark Andrews. We would need 23.6 DraftKings points in order for him to meet 4x value. The Vikings do have the 3rd highest implied team total here heading into the main slate, so I really do like that. Justin Jefferson is going to be the focal point in this offense, but he's also going to garner the most ownership. Hawkinson could go under the radar just a little bit. I don't want to see he's going to be super under-owned, but certainly less owned than JJ. And the Bucs were not very good against tight ends last year, ranking 24th overall against the position. Next on my list there is Dallas Goedert of the Philadelphia Eagles. Name dropped him when I was talking about A.J. Brown. Very similar situation here in the sense that the Eagles are just going overlooked in week 1, in my opinion. But I do want to mention here that this Patriots defense ranked 20th overall against the tight end position just last year. By no means elite against them either. And Dallas Goedert, I know he kind of has some highs and lows here within this offense because there's just so many playmakers, but he did show that he had a ceiling score of 27 Draftkings points just last year. That'd be over 5x value at his current price. And then the last tight end that I got there is Gerald Everett of the Los Angeles Chargers. I know I've mentioned a couple of times now that the players and this game in general is going to be very popular on the main slate, but this is actually one player who could fly under the radar and go low owned. I don't know if that should be the case here. At $4,300, we need just 17.2 DraftKings points in order for him to meet 4x value, and the Dolphins were not very good against tight ends last year, ranking 30th overall. And then to wrap up the positional plays here, we got some defenses. We'll keep this short and sweet. First one I got there is the Seattle Seahawks. Yes, I talked about this game from a game stack perspective at the beginning of this video, but that doesn't mean that I don't like the Seahawks defense. I got some studs in that secondary, and Matthew Stafford threw 8 interceptions last year in just 9 games. Next on my radar there is the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. They do have Brock Purdy here this week, who obviously made a name for himself for the 49ers last year, but he's also coming back from injury. And we all know this Steelers defense plays well at home. They should be able to make some noise against the second-year quarterback. And then finally there, I got the Carolina Panthers defense. A little cheaper defense at $2,600. This defense absolutely has some playmakers on it. J.C. Horn, Brian Burns. But the cause for concern here is that Atlanta just doesn't play all that fast, runs the hell out of the ball, eats up the clock, and that could very well happen. But again, at $2,600, we only need 10.4 DraftKings points in order for them to meet 4x value, and they are playing Desmond Ridder, who's an unproven quarterback. All right, everyone, that is going to wrap up this video here for today. As always, thank y'all for taking the time out of your day to watch the content here on this channel. If you could like this video and subscribe to the channel, I would greatly appreciate that. Let's have ourselves a great week 1 here, folks. Let's win some money as well. In the meantime, I'm out of here.